Thank you. I just wanted to very quickly to respond to something Mr. Weir said. He mentioned that a deferred prosecution agreement might be necessary in order to protect the company's ability to get federal contracts. That is actually not true. That is another falsehood that has been disseminated about this controversy. The government has already granted an exemption to the ineligibility and suspension policy. And that exemption allows SNC-Lavalin to continue to bid on federal projects, even though it would otherwise be banned due to its charges. And the government has already indicated plans to extend that exemption, even if the company is convicted. So the company can get an exemption even after convicted from the ban on federal bidding. If that were the government's only goal here in shelving these charges, it doesn't need to interrupt the trial. It can do so under its current with its current powers with an exemption from the bidding ban. But to Mr. Erskine-Smith, he mentioned that the motion is premature, that we ought not hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould until such time as she's had her chance to submit her additional documentary evidence to the Justice Committee. We would be prepared to amend the original motion to read that she would appear here within a week of having submitted additional documentary evidence to Justice. That would solve the problem that Mr. Erskine-Smith is worried about. It would ensure that her documentation is received by committee, published by that committee's chair, available to all committees around all members around the table, and that way we would all be dealing with the most up-to-date evidence when the hearings go ahead. So I know I don't control the speaking list, but I'd invite Mr. Erskine-Smith to respond to that compromise.
Okay, so we do have the amendment before us. I guess it's a friendly amendment to the amendment, to the motion. And he has asked, and we have Mr. Kent up next, but would you like Mr. Erskine-Smith to respond first? Go ahead, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
To the extent that it makes sense to consider this question on a later occasion, it would make far more sense, in my view, to see the documentary production, see what is said, see if there is anything new there substantively that needs to be addressed, see how justice reacts to that. And I take, Ms. Ramsey, your concerns to heart, but it's still appropriate, I think, as far as our parliamentary colleagues are concerned, to see how they react and where that committee is properly seized with it, and then to make a determination. I don't think it makes any sense today to make any determination when we don't know what is to come. And so, Mr. Kent, if you want to have this conversation again down the road, but my view, as I've expressed, is we are going to have the Ethics Commissioner sit right here, and we're going to be able to put to him questions about limitations or problems or problems with insufficient resources, problems with his mandate, or if he is sufficiently tasked with this. And those are the questions I think that this committee should be seized with right now, absent new information that we don't know yet what is to come. So, I respect the attempt to put this back on the agenda for me today, but the fact that this is premature isn't cured by saying, well, let's make a decision today and have it take effect a week from now.
Seeing this is a bit of a conversation, I'll put it back to Mr. Poilievre, and then we'll move on to Mr. Kent.
All right. So I had understood Mr. Erskine-Smith's position to be that we needed to see the evidence that Madam Raybould Wilson would provide the Justice Committee, and that we couldn't hear from her until that time. So I think I had a solution that would allow us to do that. I still think we unfortunately we don't appear to have support for that compromise. That said, I think we should vote on the motion and the amendment here and give Liberals an opportunity to either put up or cover up as is their option, as are their options. And then I take from Mr. Erskine-Smith's position that even if the motion doesn't pass, he'd be willing to reconsider after Ms. Wilson-Raybould's information is tabled before the Justice Committee. So that is another avenue to be pursued down the road.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre.